Many thanks for staying with News Central and a warm welcome to the program. My name is Felicity Eziwike. The third South Summit ended in Kampala on Monday, that's January 22. It gathered high-level representatives from nearly 100 countries, as well as heads of United Nations agencies. The two-day meeting was held under the theme, Leaving No One Behind, and the aim is to promote South-South cooperation in the fields of trade, investment, sustainable development, climate change, poverty elimination, and digital economy. Now, the South Summit is the supreme decision-making body of the Group of 77, that's G77, which was established in 1964. But since the 1990s, China has been coordinating and cooperating with the G7 through the G77 and China mechanism, which is an important platform for developing countries to unite, to strengthen themselves and coordinate to respond to challenges. This particular summit is the first time it will be held in Africa. The two previous summits were held in Havana, Cuba in 2000 and in Doha, Qatar in 2005. On one slot today, we'll be looking at the impact or the benefit of this South Summit. And to speak on the just concluded round, we have Ambassador Adonai Ayebare, Uganda's permanent representative of Uganda to the United Nations in New York. He's joining me from Kampala. Thank you very much for giving us your time.
Thank you, Aisha, for having me.
All right, my name is actually Felicity. Aisha is one of the producers for the program. All right, I honestly never heard of this summit until quite recently. I'm sure I'll be forgiving considering it has only held 3 times since its creation. What in your view is the relevance of this summit to Africa?
Actually, there were 2 summits. There was the Non-Aligned Movement Summit, which takes place every 3 years, and then there was the 3rd summit, which you are correct is the 3rd time. And let me bring the 2 summits together. These 2 summits represent the entire global South. So their relevance for Africa is really big. Africa is part of the global South. And when we talk about the global South, we're talking about 80% of the population in the world. So Africa gets its diplomatic leverage through working with the entire global South.
All right. The UN Secretary was there, and he said the summit is the voice of the global South, indeed, like you just said. But is it really? How does this summit in itself contribute towards enhancing Africa's position in the global economy?
Absolutely. It's an opportunity for Africa. Depends on how we leverage it. Africa at the United Nations and other multilateral forum works first and foremost in the African group, which is 55 countries. But then when you work within the group of 77, especially at the UN, the group of 77 is the largest negotiating group. From trade to debt, to climate change, mention it. So we have leverage. The point is that we must be active in these groups as Africa. We must show up and make our views known so that we can mobilize the global South towards fulfilling, getting results on the issues that affect us most.
If it doesn't meet this often, this is the 3rd time in as many years. Why is the meeting so sparse, really? How do they coordinate the South Summit and the G77 if they have these limited times that they meet? Or is there a continuum as per you don't have to meet in order to collaborate and make decisions?
Let me give you context. The group of 77 meets in New York regularly, almost every month at ambassadorial level. And ministers meet every September in New York on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly.
I think the internet has interrupted us. Let's see if we can get him back If you're just tuning in, this is one slot. We're looking at the just concluded, that's about a week ago, the Third South Summit. And our guest is explaining its relevance to us in Africa and the role it plays in enhancing cohesion, cooperation, and collaboration among participating countries. He was just about to explain the frequency of the meeting, because when we started, I did say that this is the third time the meeting, the summit has held in as many years, and I was quite worried as to how they make decisions. But he has just clarified that the G77 does indeed meet often to discuss issues that affect the global south. All right, let's see if we have Adonia back. Thank you very much for staying with us. We lost you for a bit there. Before we went on that short break, you were talking about the G77 and how it operates. You say they meet all the time, based off my question on the frequency of meeting and resolution of issues. Please continue.
Yes, we meet every month at ambassadorial level in New York at the UN, all the representatives of 134 countries and China, coordinate positions, and our ministers meet every September. The summit is a one-off because it takes strategic decisions, like the outcome document. The Kampala outcome document gives us strategic direction so that we can implement our mandate more effectively. But we meet regularly every month. I can give you an example. We started meeting about the Summit of the Future, which is going to take place in September. We are coordinating positions already on different issues to deal with the reform of the international financial architecture, reform of global institutions, and the Pact of the Future.
All right. Before we, get your thoughts on the deliberations that actually occurred at the summit, I'd like you to, for those that might not be aware, how has this South Summit contributed towards promoting that cooperation and collaboration among the participating countries?
When countries meet at the head of state level, they really discuss strategic issues. For example, on the issue of debt, the decision was taken that we should go and look at structuring the international financial architecture to deal with the issue of debt that is affecting most developing countries. Also, the issue of reform of global institutions like the UN and other multilateral institutions was discussed. So now we have to drill down as ambassadors to make sure that we look at specific issues dealing with the reforms.
Has there been some progress that has been recorded that, gives impetus to the continuous conversations that decisions that are made at the summit?
Yes, the decisions were really made. We came up with an outcome document. Basically now our role is to really implement it by by unpacking it and make sure that reforms that were decided on by the leaders are implemented at the UN and other multilateral institutions.
All right, you talked about some of the key discussions and debates that took place during the summit. Ease of trade, that's international finance. You talked about something that Guterres also mentioned, and that's the reform of international organization. I also know that conversations about visa and immigration also came up. So just give us maybe a ballpark of some of the key discussions and outcomes from the summit.
That issue came up, but as you know, the G77 is a large gathering, different continents. So as you know, Africa is advanced on the issue of movement of people and goods and services, but other regions of the world are not so advanced. What we did was showcase Africa and encourage developing countries to really ameliorate the FCTA, for example, and different regions of Africa were able to show ECOWAS, East African Community, SADC were able to talk about what they have done, to really learn from each other as the Global South.
Okay, were there any specific projects or initiatives that were announced during the summit that would potentially foster deeper cooperation among African nations? You talked about the presence of these regional bodies.
Really, it focused about South-South cooperation. For example, what can Africa learn from Southeast Asia that seems to have advanced in the area of technology transfer and industrialization? So it was basically how can the Global South cooperate to leverage, as you know, overseas development assistance has declined over the years. So how can we leverage South-South cooperation to implement, for example, SDGs, to make sure that we take common positions on issue of trade? So it was really to discuss deepening South-South cooperation.
Okay, how would you assess the level of representation? Because it is key to decisions that are made. Were there enough representation from the different sectors and industries at the summit, in your view?
No, this was an intergovernmental process. Only governments were represented that really, set up these policies. But they were on the sidelines. You had the business summit that brought the private sector and businesses. But in the room of the Third South Summit was governments. But there were noises from outside, from civil society, from businesses that fed into the deliberations in the summit room.
Okay, what would be some of the challenges that were identified that is impacting partnerships and the global cooperation?
The impediments were really how cohesive, we need to be cohesive as the Global South so that we can negotiate better. As you know, the Global South now is really no longer poor. You have developing countries that are developed. How can they really take the lead in terms of addressing the issue of debt, in terms of addressing the issue of technology transfer, in terms of addressing peace and security issues? So basically was how can we leverage our strengths to achieve common issues that affect us?
Okay, were there any discussions regarding the role of maybe innovation and entrepreneurship?
Absolutely, absolutely. Innovation really dominated on how can we leverage innovation and how can we learn from each other. As you know, Asian economies are more advanced in this area than, for example, African. The Middle East is also almost moving to AI, artificial intelligence. How can we leverage this? How can we learn from each other? Areas of the Global South that are not yet advanced in innovation, how can we really leverage this? Because the North-South cooperation has really not borne results. How can we leverage the South-South cooperation in the area of innovation?
Were there key recommendations put forward during the summit in terms of promoting trade and investment between participating countries? You did talk about the ease of doing business and the talk around, impacting international organizations towards that goal.
Exactly, trade. I mean, free trade. I mean, nobody has to trade. Protectionism was really discussed and discouraged. The outcome document talks about strengthening WTO processes, make sure that goods from the South access the global North markets without hindrance. That was really, really one of the key issues. And also, how can we improve the quality of what we export to the global North and among ourselves?
I want you to expand on that protectionism. What do you mean? What has been the impact, and has there been any forward movement in terms of reducing that?
As you know, the goods and services from the Global South have been prevented from accessing markets of the global North that is developed. And we really called on the rich countries in the global North to respect the trade rules, the anti-protectionism trade rules, especially through the WTO, so that these developing countries can access markets for their goods and services. Which, when we talk about financing for development, you cannot achieve financing for development, or you cannot achieve implementation of SDGs if you are not allowing the Global South to access markets.
These meetings, do they reassure you that we're inching closer? Let me focus on Africa and instead of the generality of the Global South, but Are we inching closer to achieving the SDGs based off of decisions that are being made at these summits?
Basically, we took a realistic analysis of what is going on. Most African countries are really doing badly with implementation of SDGs, maybe 30%, and we have 7 years to go to reach the 2030. So there was a sober assessment that we needed to do more in terms of funding. How can we access, reasonable funding? When you look at most African countries, capital is really expensive. And without capital, without funding, we will not achieve SDGs. And especially, the impact of COVID and all that, if trade levels don't go up, if there is no cheap capital that can really spur these countries or African countries, we will not attain the SDGs.
Okay, when it talks about connectivity, because we know this is essential if we're to enhance cooperation, did that play any key role in the conversation that was had? Also, development in terms of infrastructure, these two are connected.
Absolutely.
Hello, Adonai, can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you. I can hear you, but I can't see you.
I think that's
I can hear you.
Okay, just go ahead then and respond. I'm trying to find out from you if there were conversations about connectivity, because this is essential for enhancing cooperation and whatever goal we need to achieve.
Absolutely, connectivity was one of the issues that were tackled. We have to really have the infrastructure, the backbone. We have to have, if we don't have connectivity and accessible and affordable, for example, internet, we are not going to be competitive. At the UN, we are talking about the digital compact that will really discuss how developed countries can leverage connectivity to attain SDGs and other developmental outcomes. It was really dominated, and how can we really learn from each other? As I said at the beginning, Asian countries are advanced into this, and there were really conversations on how can we leverage South-South cooperation in this area.
All right, what would be some of the next steps that need to be taken to ensure the implementation of recommendations and outcomes of the South Summit in Uganda?
The recommendation is really to take these recommendations that were reached in the summit and, for example, implement them during the negotiations of the summit of the future. Really, that would be very, very helpful for us to reach common positions. And those reforms are really necessary at the global level to really help developing countries achieve developmental outcomes.
All right, Adonai, thank you very much for speaking with us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for staying with News Central. Has ECOWAS become a threat to its member states? Well, that's the accusation being leveled by the military regimes of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, as they've announced their collective withdrawal from the bloc on Sunday. According to a joint statement read on Niger national television, the move is with immediate effect. They said the regional bloc, under the influence of foreign powers, betrayed its founding principles and failed to aid its member states in their fight against terrorism and insecurity. Without question, the regimes have had tense ties with ECOWAS since coups took place in Niger last July, Mali in 2020, and Burkina Faso in 2022. All three were suspended from ECOWAS, with Niger and Mali facing heavy sanctions. Now, expectedly, response to their decision to withdraw has been swift. While there are reports of celebrations by citizens, some analysts are blasting the junta for what they describe as a colossal act of economic self-sabotage. The three countries are among the 6 landlocked states in Africa. We know landlocked countries don't have direct access to the ocean or the sea. How does cutting off countries that surround them in a period of economic instability improve the economic situation of the three countries, especially since none of them has a vibrant economy? To assess the implication of this decision, I am joined now by Mawuli Dake, CEO, the Africa Group Consults. He joins us from Accra, Ghana. It's good to have you on one slot.
To join you and your listeners.
The cacophony of voices obscure clarity as to where our focus should be on this matter. Let's start with a simple question. Was this a wise decision? And what would be your argument or logic for your stance?
I'm sad to disappoint you. I don't think it's as simple as that.
Aww.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would have loved to answer it as a simple question. But the bottom line is those withdrawing have raised some serious concerns. And there are questions that we cannot dismiss. The bottom line is nobody wins from this. Either ECOWAS or those who remain in ECOWAS, nor those withdraw, those three countries will win this. It's not in the interest of our region, especially for me as a Pan-Africanist or as someone who specializes in international law. I know that we may be tempted to be looking at the legalities and international law and all that, but this is more a failure of regional diplomacy, a failure of regional leadership, than it is of a legal matter or international law. And we also recognize the importance of our sub-region, the unity, the ideals, the vision of ECOWAS for a united sub-region towards the greater vision and dream, Pan-African dream of a united Africa. Without it, Africa will continue to be a pawn on the global stage. So I know that this is a loss for everybody, but their concerns are not concerns that we can easily dismiss, and it's not a matter of either or. I think that they have raised legitimate concerns. And if you look at public opinion, with the exception of our analysts and experts and West African leaders, generally, if you look at the response from our citizenry as West Africans, people side with them. ECOWAS has failed us. And this is not the solution, but the status quo is also not the solution. So we need a solution.
Okay.
So
before we come to talk about the solutions, I'm intrigued by something you said about the failure of regional leadership and diplomacy. You make it sound like it's a new thing. This is something that is synonymous with the whole of Africa. We have a problem of leadership, and we now have a situation that is a reflection of what is obtained. I mean, the leaders of ECOWAS are from the pool of leadership that we have across the continent. So wherein lies the way forward when decisions like this are taken? You say citizens seem to think it's a good thing. Frustration can make that seem like, and they might just make it work, don't you think?
True. So yes, we do have a general leadership crisis on the continent, but some regions are doing more. Well, some regions are doing better than West Africa. We have just recorded the highest number of coups, and I'm sure we have recorded the highest number of coups in the history of the continent. And this is 2023, and we still have the highest number of military coups and military regimes. So we do have a peculiar problem. And I also will recognize that we have had leadership that's, for instance, Nigeria has had a leadership under Obasanjo, for instance. Ghana, we had leadership under Jerry John Rawlings. These were people that responded to regional crisis in a different way, compared to your current leader, whose initial response was, okay, we are going to send in military. We all know that one of the 101 plates of power is that do not issue a threat that you cannot carry it out. And everybody knows that that was a wrong-headed decision or threat from your president, President Tinubu, to threaten to send in military at the beginning of the crisis. So yes, we do have a general African crisis, and we do have a West African crisis. But I think that in this particular time, we have leadership failure from my president. Ghana's president was the chair of ECOWAS when a number of the coups occurred. So it's a shared responsibility among our leaders, not just Nigerian leader, Ghana's leader, Akufo-Addo, and the other regional leaders. And let's not forget the geopolitical underlings of this crisis, the contribution of France, the West.
Yeah, we will come to that. I specifically tried not to get to that point. Try to take us away from, because we always seem to look at the external influence when you have identified that we have a question of leadership, a failure of diplomacy. And in this case, you talked about the not issuing threats that you cannot follow through. If that is one rule, then ECOWAS rules states that withdrawal from the bloc takes up to 1 year to be finalized. And then you have these people saying that they are going to leave with immediate effect. Is that something that can work? Can they withdraw immediately?
Well, if you ask me as an international law expert, my answer is no, but that is irrelevant. We do not have anybody to enforce these laws or decisions. So it's a sovereign decision. If the leader of the current government of Burkina Faso or Mali or Niger, regardless of what others think about it, say we are withdrawing, they are not cooperating. You cannot send in military. Nigeria Supreme Court cannot tell them what to do. ECOWAS Court can tell them what to do, but they are at liberty to treat it with contempt. So yes, from international law perspective, they cannot withdraw because they signed to join ECOWAS, and the rules are clear. You have to give 1 year notice. But the guys are saying we are out. So that's why I said at the beginning that we may want to treat this as a legal or international law issue, but it's more of a political issue. And they have withdrawn, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. So I would like to look at it. I would like to put my law and international expertise on the side and face the reality of the political reality of them withdrawing, and that is real.
Okay, let me allow you to drive this conversation. What is the political reality?
The political reality is that these are sovereign states. And the government, the current government, no matter what others think of it, is the government. Is the same at the national stage, where citizens or civil society or think tanks or international organizations will say, okay, this president stole the election, is illegitimate or whatever. But at the end of the day, that becomes the national government, and they wield the power of the state, and they decide for the state. And there's just simply nothing anybody can do. So the political reality is that we have current governments in these three nations, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Our West African governments under ECOWAS say, oh, we do not recognize them, we've suspended them. But they are the legitimate, these are sovereign states. Unfortunately, as President Tinubu threatened to send in military to overthrow them, it can't happen, and he couldn't do it. So the political reality is that these are the legitimate governments, the current governments of these three nations, and they will decide for their nations as sovereign states, regardless of what you and I expect or think of them.
There is no simple answer, like you rightly pointed out at the beginning of the program. I was looking for a simple way to understand the controversy as it were. But there's another side of the divide that is saying that the decision of these three countries might be just a ploy to fast-track better negotiations, especially over their claims that ECOWAS sanctions were inhumane and irresponsible, and they also describe it as a violation of the bloc's own rules.
Yes, I do share the opinion that the ECOWAS sanctions were a bit rash and ill thought through, because I will always take the side of the citizens. And the citizens of these countries were not the culprits or the cause of the changes that happened. So in taking a decision, if I were in an advisory position, I would have advised the ECOWAS regional body to take decisions that wouldn't negatively affect the people of these countries. But we know that the decisions that they take, these blockades and stuff, affect the people more. So I do share the opinion that the decisions were not well thought through. And I do also share the opinion that most of West Africans are expressing, that our leaders usually would not express a concern when it comes to their peers taking decisions that undermine the rights and dignity of their people, but always coming when they are overthrown. And that is exactly what we have seen.
Yeah, there's a part to the question that you seem to have missed, and that has to do with I asked you about the decision may be a ploy to negotiate, to fast-track negotiation, to try and resolve some of these sanctions that has been imposed. Do you think it is a ploy that they are not, since they need a year in order for them to pull out fully?
Well, the rules of negotiations dictate that you do that. You cannot start from where you want to be. You have to start from somewhere so that you can negotiate to the point that you want to be. So tactically, that is expected. So I'm not in a position to say that that is what is happening, but these are government with strategies and advisors and all that, and that is expected, that you negotiate way beyond where you want to be so that you can, because if they start from what they want, they will not get that. You have to give something. So yes, that's understandable, even though I'm not in the position to confirm or deny that.
Maybe we could draw some lessons from history. Are there any precedent cases of similar withdrawals from not necessarily ECOWAS, just maybe regional organization in West Africa or Africa as a whole? And what was the situation then, and how did it impact, cooperation?
Well, I wouldn't be able to give you specific examples and what it led to, but I am aware that, for instance, I was the lead consultant for a committee of experts that was appointed by the first president of ECOWAS to develop ECOWAS Vision 2020. And we're preparing our final report for the Vision 2020 in 2010. And our opening remark was that this is the first time in the history of ECOWAS that all 25 member countries were led by democratically elected governments. By the time we were supposed to submit the report, there had been 2 or 3 coups in Guinea and somewhere else. So we had to change the entire thing. And they were suspended and then withdrawn and they came back. We know that at the end of the day, ECOWAS knows that they need all the regional countries to be parts of the sub-region. And the specific countries also know that they have to be part of the sub-regional body to be able to stand on their feet and have any meaningful impact on the global stage. They know that. And so this may just be games that they are playing. Eventually, I know and I hope that these countries come back to ECOWAS, but not this ECOWAS that has failed all of us, but an ECOWAS that stands up to the ideals and the vision that the founding fathers had for us as a people.
I mean, I have so many questions lined up, but I'm told we have less than 4 minutes to complete this segment of the program. I'll just ask. Oh, I'm now told it's 2 minutes. So in that 2 minutes, I'd like you to speak. I interrupted you when you started talking about the influence of foreign powers. I do have a question on that. Is there some merit in the accusation that ECOWAS, under the influence of foreign powers, are betraying principles and as well as failing their member states in the fight against terrorism and insecurity? Could you explain your understanding of this for us?
Finally, I can finally answer your question with an emphatic yes.
Okay.
Because, yes, those of us who are students of this regional politics and pay attention to geopolitics, there's no denial, for instance, about the influence of France, for instance, on the regional body. There have been exposés as far as their interference in choice of leadership, blackmail and all that, and especially using puppet government among the Francophone countries to manipulate and undermine. You are from Nigeria, you know the role Nigeria has played, for instance, in establishing the ECO, a West African currency, because you know that our individual nation currencies just are too weak. And every time the ECO is on the verge of coming to reality, France pops up. Last year, they came up. Suddenly, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal, and some Guinea said, oh, we are forming our own ECO. So yes, it is true. And now there's a new player on the block, Russia. We all don't want to be victims to Russian politics. But desperate, I think you mentioned that desperate measures, desperate conditions push people to do things that they will usually not do. So the big players are bullying our countries. And Russia seems to be a big player that seems to reason with some of these people, or at least can offer them some relief. So some of them are aligning with them. You can't blame them. So true, we cannot deny the manipulations and the interference of regional bodies and international players, especially France. And we have to do something about that.
Indeed, so much to talk about, but so little time. But we did get some insights. Thank you very much for the insights you've provided to the conversation.
Thank you, too. It's been a pleasure.
And that's where we wrap things up for today. Thank you for watching. The program returns next week. Bye for now.